Hello, my name is Ted Holsey. I'm Vice President of Marketing at eFolder and your host for today's event. Welcome to the eFolder Partner Chats. This webinar series brings together leading eFolder partners for business-oriented discussions. Today's topic is 3 secrets to pricing and packaging your BDR service. Today we are joined by Erik Thorsell, President of Success Computer Consulting. In just a moment, I will further introduce Erik. Let's see here. Before we go through the agenda, let's cover a few housekeeping items. Today's session is being recorded. The recorded version of the webinar will be made available on eFolder's YouTube channel. We will also make copies of the slides available to those who attended the event. With over 150 people registered for today's session, we've put all participants in listen-only mode. You can enjoy the audio portion of today's event by either streaming it to your computer or by dialing in over the phone. Questions are strongly encouraged throughout. We have planned a special Q&A section at the end of today's discussion, but you may submit as we go along, and we will try to address your questions on the fly. First, Erik is going to give a good background on Success Computer Consulting and how they have successfully grown their BDR franchise over the past few years. Next, Erik is going to share the key secrets to his company's success. And lastly, we will have plenty of time for your questions during the Q&A section. Now let me introduce today's guest. Erik Thorsell is founder and president of Success Computer Consulting. He started Success Computer Consulting in 1992 in a spare bedroom of his home. Originally serving large companies, Erik decided to shift his focus to small and medium-sized organizations. He knew that if he brought his corporate experience to these clients, he'd be able to develop a service offering that really made a noticeable difference to their businesses. Today, more than 20 years later, Success Computer Consulting's talented team is based at its headquarters in Golden Valley, Minnesota, where they have their headquarters. SCC's clients include small and medium-sized businesses, nonprofit organizations, and educational institutions. Erik, thanks for joining us today, and welcome.
Thanks, Ted. And I have to say to start out that it was a weird surprise to see that invite go out talking about my experience as the Pillsbury Doughboy, but that was really true. And so since some people have emailed me about it, I thought I would start out by saying, yes, I really did work for the Pillsbury Company when I got out of college, and one of my jobs was to put on an 8-foot-high inflated flannel doughboy costume and make appearances all around the country. So even though I thought maybe doing this webinar was my 15 minutes of fame, it could be that my experience as the doughboy was truly that opportunity. So, you know, what I tell people all the time is I really have no business being in the IT field. With a background in music education in school and being the Pillsbury Doughboy and then working for American Express, honestly, what in heaven's name am I doing in being a managed service provider? But, you know, here I am nonetheless, and so I want to share what I've learned or what I'm learning in the process of selling BDRs. And like many business owners, I learn from my failures and my mistakes. If you've met me before, you know that I don't just fail, I fail big time. So I don't really pretend to have the secret, but I hope that by sharing some ideas, you might find a new way to think about backup and disaster recovery in your business. So a little bit about my company. Although we have 35 people today, we only had about 12 people 6 years ago, and we decided to change our business strategy in 2006 and decided we wanted to grow. I know that sounds weird, but up until then, our strategy was, let's stay a small boutique shop. And we decided instead to grow because we felt like we could be a more profitable business, and our clients were counting on us for that. Around that time, I joined Heartland Technology Groups, HTG, and became a vendor partner like eFolder, a vendor partner of eFolders as well. HTG, if you're familiar with it, focuses on execution and accountability. And the HTG leadership often quotes Thomas Edison that says, vision without execution is hallucination. To me, it means my words are useless if I haven't taken action. It's a constant challenge to me in business, so I want to begin by challenging you. If you hear an idea today about how you can build your BDR business, or better yet, if you think of a better way than what you hear today, I challenge you at the end of the call to execute. Thinking about something is not execution. Deciding to do something in the future is not execution. You see, if you execute, then I can listen to your story next and find my own ideas to borrow. But some stuff about our business, we've gone through some other shifts too. When we started as a business, we were really focused on customers who use Small Business Server. and they still make up a significant part of our client base. But in the last 4 years, we decided we wanted to swim upstream a little bit. We wanted to focus on clients who have networks with 75 to 500 users. And these are folks who have dedicated internal IT staff, usually. We made that change because we felt like we could go deeper with those clients over time. We felt like there was just more opportunity to get more work, larger agreements, that kind of thing. So we still get small business clients too. We're still in the trenches with small business server, those kinds of things. But another shift that happened was a shift in how we do managed services. We used to be kind of a typical price per device, all-you-can-eat model. It's kind of the traditional managed service pricing strategy. And unlike a lot of other people, we really failed at it. We lost money. We kept spending more time than we thought we would serving clients, and we couldn't get that under control. So we switched business models. And as a result, our managed service offering, and by the way, it still is a managed service. I argue with people about this sometimes. So even though we don't charge at all-you-can-eat price, we are still proactive. We still align our interests with our clients' interests. But our managed service is priced on an a la carte model, and you'll see why that matters in my upcoming slides in a few minutes. But just a little bit more about our BDR business. And Ted, I'm having a little trouble advancing the slide. If you could do it for me, that would be great. Thank you.
Okay.
All right. So a few statistics about our business. And I don't make the claim that these statistics are good or bad, high or low. They're just the numbers. That said, I'm pretty happy with these numbers in our BDR business, particularly our BDR gross margin of over 75%. It's the highest gross margin we get of any product or service that's in our sales portfolio. And that's really great. I like getting that kind of margin. But the fact that that margin comes on a predictable, reliable, monthly recurring revenue basis is awesome. And one of the ways I think about our BDR business is gross profit. It's kind of a kooky mind game I play with myself, is that it now covers the total cost of all our employee benefits, including our health insurance, dental, life insurance, retirement plans. BDRs make it possible, in a way, for me not to have to worry about how I'm going to pay those bills anymore, because we've built up this recurring monthly revenue in a really profitable business model. So if our results are consistently like those, and they are, then our company should be really aggressive about protecting that business and its profitability. So I want to share the strategy we use with selling BDRs to clients. But first, some general thoughts about our managed service business. I have 3 items I want to say. So the first one, our BDR business, I just told you, is a high margin offering. We get 75% gross margin in that business. High margin offerings like that, I suppose you could argue, have kind of a competitive bullseye on them. Everyone sells BDRs these days. So if my local competitors are on this call, someone might decide, I'm going to call Erik's clients and sell against their high margin. But just know that we thought of that already. It didn't only occur to me right now that people might become aware that we make a high margin on BDRs. So I'll talk a little bit about how we try to protect ourselves from price competition. Second thought I want to share is our business is a relationship business. Our clients work with us just like they work with any managed service provider because they trust us to be knowledgeable and honorable, and because we deliver value to them. And so it makes me think of the question, is charging a high margin honorable? Is it ethical to make that kind of gross margin on a service that we sell or a product that we sell? And the answer for us is absolutely it's honorable, and I would never lie to a client about our margins. Good clients want to work with a profitable, financially stable partner because we're going to be around for the long haul. And it usually is an indication that, we run a healthy business. Our clients know that they pay us a price that is far less than the cost of not buying our services, though, and that's who we compare to, or the scenario we compare to. How much would it cost them if they didn't buy a BDR? So yeah, we have competitors out in the marketplace, and I have to say, though, we have never experienced price competition on BDRs in the marketplace, so we don't base our pricing on what the other guy might do or what we guess the other guy might do in the marketplace. And then the third thought is, it's important that we understand how profitable each of our product lines is in our business, and that we manage to profitability goals. So for example, every time we sell a laptop, I try to make sure that the pricing in that sale doesn't lower the average margin we're going to get during that month on all the products that we sell. So we said, first of all, before that laptop deal came up, we said, how much margin do we want to make in general on the hardware that we sell? And we price with that objective in mind. It's a conscious decision, and the same thing applies with BDRs. Our profitability here didn't happen by accident. It was a conscious decision. We decided to make a profitable BDR practice here. And I think that's an important thing to consider, not to make pricing decisions when you're doing a proposal, but to make them in advance based on what your business needs are. So let me see if I can get this slide to advance, or if I need your help, Ted. Looks like I'm going to need your help again.
Let me just
because this next slide is just awesome. No, I'm just kidding. So basically, these are the three. How was that, Ted? This is our three strategies around selling BDRs, and I'm going to go into depth on each of these. So basically, I'm going to read this to you. Number one, we really want to understand our client needs in their terms, not only in technical terms. Number two, we unbundle the offering of backup and disaster recovery, and then we build on top of it. I'll explain what I mean by that. And then third, we protect the margin. We have a standard in our company that BDRs should get a 66% minimum margin. They can go down to 50% only if a manager approves it. So we're very careful about protecting that. Otherwise, it's natural that margins want to erode. Every deal seems like one where we ought to cut the price a little bit. So we made the decision up front. We're going to build this business to have a high margin, and we're going to be disciplined in protecting that. So I'll go into some details on, number one, understanding needs in their terms. I want to start out by talking a little bit about how we do assessments for clients, because most of our BDR sales and most of our managed service sales come out of doing an assessment. And we use the Microsoft Assessment and Planning Toolkit, the MAP Toolkit, and affiliated with that on the Microsoft partner side are a whole bunch of questions that managed service providers can ask of potential clients that aren't technical questions at all, but they're about the business. They're showing the client that we see that there's a connection between technology and why they're in business and what they do. We see that technology is here to serve the business and not the other way around. And so we tell C-level business leaders that we want to talk and not about bits and bytes. We want to talk about their own business. We ask who they are and what they do. We ask how they plan to grow and how much. We ask them to talk about their competitors and how they would compare to their competitors and how they compete with them. We also ask them about technology, but from their perspectives. So again, we're not talking about configuration options and that kind of thing. We're asking questions like, how does technology make them better than their competitors, or how could it? We ask them what competitors are role models to them with technology. So when they think of other people who do what they do, is there anyone who's doing something really cool or innovative with technology that they really respect? Or not just competitors, but what other businesses are doing that? And why is that interesting to them? And when we have that conversation, we can then move into one where we talk about their pain and their problems. And obviously, you know, BDRs present a huge opportunity for us to talk about what could go wrong. What do you worry about? What are the things that keep you up at night? You know, too much kind of those questions, I think, can start to sound like we're doing this scare tactic approach to selling, which is not our desire. We just simply want to lay all the information out in front of us with the client or the prospect, and then look at the real world and make a smart decision for their business about what they need. So when we're talking about pain in their business, it's important to remember no small business network is designed with the idea that it's going to eliminate 100% of downtime or failure. I mean, that's just too cost prohibitive. The kind of redundancy you'd have to put in place, I mean, even if you did, there's no guarantee of 100% uptime. Yet, we know that, yet sometimes clients think that a 30-minute outage means that someone did something wrong. Someone's bad, someone should be at fault, and that, you know, any downtime at all is intolerable. So our job has to be to help clients realize they're not buying the perfect system. They're buying the right balance of performance, fault tolerance, security, flexibility for their budget. But they can't buy perfection. So with that in mind, then we have to talk about downtime. And I don't think it's a weakness in our business to say, you know what, downtime's going to happen, failure will happen, data loss will happen. So let's plan for it. And let's talk about what kinds of interruptions can the business really tolerate. So we have this, we call it our tolerance for downtime conversation. We have a little grid. And what we talk about is we say to the client, all right, imagine that a failure happens at the very worst possible time. Maybe it's going to happen right when you're going to print payroll checks, or maybe it's going to happen right when you need to process a big order or something. And then we say system by system. So let's start out with an obvious one. Everyone has email. So with email, what's the maximum tolerable outage you can stand? How long would that be in weeks, days, hours, or minutes for each system? And so we ask them to really think about that, and usually their answer is, with email, no tolerance, or maybe 5 minutes or 15 minutes, some very low amount of time. And so then we try to make it a little harder, and we'll put some artificial variable in it that might say, well, what's the longest outage you can tolerate where preventing it could have cost $5,000? Would you have spent $5,000 to prevent that 15-minute outage, or could you have tolerated it for a little longer if it would save you $5,000? So we just try and put some pressure on them. It's artificial, but just to think, am I really committed to that 15-minute number? And then we ask them to think, well, what does that outage cost you? And this can be kind of artificial, and we don't want it. We want the client to talk about real numbers that they really believe in, not pie-in-the-sky baloney. So if your email was out for an hour, would you really miss any orders? You know, what would really grind to a halt in your business, and what would it cost? Would you really have idle employees, or would they be able to keep busy with something else? So we try to put a price on these things and ask the client to estimate how much an hour of downtime would cost in their own terms and numbers that they believe. So we're framing the customer need by gathering this information. And we're going to say it back to them in their terms. So at the end of the conversation, our job is to be able to make a statement that says something like, so, you know, you need a system that can deliver reliability in alignment with your tolerances, which are, and we kind of review that page, is that right? And they say yes. And we say, okay, well, let's talk about the difference then between what you have, the capability of the system you have now, and those tolerances. So if the client ultimately says, I can't have email be down for more than 2 hours, and we know that they're using tape backup, or that they have other single points of failure in their network, and we can think of scenarios where recovery might take a day or two, then we point that out and say, what needs to change here, your technology or your tolerance? And we let the client choose. Most of the time, they want to change the technology more than they want to change the tolerance. So when we have the conversation that way, then the client doesn't hear us saying, buy a bunch of bits and bytes. Let me tell you about all this technical functionality. What they hear us say is, there are gaps between what you need and what you can tolerate, or what you have and what you can tolerate, and we have some solutions that can help to fill those gaps. And it makes the price sensitivity of the conversation be a secondary factor. So that's one thing, is a strategy that says we're going to understand our customers' needs in their own terms, and we're going to be able to sell it back to them, or say it back to them, excuse me, in that way. So without talking about a BDR, without talking about features or bits and bytes.
Hey,
so that's
Eric,
number one.
Eric,
yeah.
A couple questions. If we could just go back, Dave wants to know the tool you talked about from Microsoft on how to conduct this kind of interview. What is that tool? Where'd you get it?
Okay, well, I have to admit that it's been a few years since I've downloaded it. We just have all the questions. So what might be best for me, Ted, is to get a link and send it to you so that you can provide it to people who are on the call. But the Microsoft Assessment and Planning Toolkit, the MAP Toolkit, is actually a set of tools. And so if you search MAP Toolkit Microsoft, I would think you would find a link to it on the partner portal. That tool is also, you know, technology that scans the network and finds all kinds of other technology assessment information. It's an awesome tool. It gets updated all the time, so I would encourage you to look into it.
Okay. A couple other questions. How many salespeople do you have, and how do you train them on this sort of a sales approach?
So we have a total of 6 people in our sales team. We have a manager, we have 4 account execs, and we have a sales assistant. How do we train them on this approach? First of all, we do just general sales training about, a consultative approach to selling. What I will say is that we're looking to hire another sales trainer, and so we're talking to a few different consultants right now, and I had a call yesterday with one, so I don't think I could recommend an individual company right now, but the important thing is to teach them how to ask questions and hardly ever speak. And there's a lot of sales training that talks that way, but customers want to feel understood and heard, and so we just talk about that all the time here. I think the most important way we reinforce that with our team is by constantly talking about how did the meeting go, how much talking did you do, and how much did the customer do? What did you learn about them? What can you tell us in their words that was important to them? So as a manager here, or a leader in my business, part of my job with my sales team is to constantly revisit that stuff with them.
Okay, I guess there's one more kind of follow-on question. What are you usually displacing with these clients after you have this conversation around, their tolerance for downtime and that sort of thing? What technology are you usually displacing to help them?
To be honest, that tolerance for downtime conversation is a super powerful sales tool for us, and we use it more broadly than just about BDRs. So we're talking about the whole network. If I were to respond to that question strictly about BDRs, what are we replacing there? That answer is changing, and I would say that 2 years ago, 4 years ago, we were replacing tape most often. Today, we are replacing USB hard drives and other manufacturers' BDRs. So we might be replacing a relationship they have with some other partner who already sold them a BDR, but that's okay. That doesn't mean the BDR is right for them. That doesn't mean that we can't help them if the BDR is right for them. So typically today, I would say 50% of the time, we are replacing an incumbent provider who has a BDR in place already.
And so what's the catalyst to change? I mean, is it a wholesale change of their relationship with their IT service provider, or is it, a particular pain point in a certain area?
Well, so our goal is always to do assessments with clients, or with prospects. We always want to begin the relationship that way because we always want to have these conversations first. We want to have the business conversation. If they call us because something's broken, that's fine, but that's not the basis for a good long-term consultative relationship. That's a break-fix engagement. If they call us because something's broken and we can get them to agree to have this bigger conversation, great. So the catalyst can be almost anything for having the conversation. Am I answering your question right, Ted?
Yeah,
correctly? Okay.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, so I would say it could be anything that causes the conversation to come up. But if it's someone that's new to us, we want to move the work or the engagement with that prospect toward an assessment. And the assessment lets us do this tolerance of downtime discussion.
Okay, great.
All right, so keep going?
Yeah, yep, no more questions.
All right,
now.
So number 2, unbundle and build. So first of all, before I talk about what I mean by that, if you think about what are your costs when you're selling BDRs? So in my mind, there are 3 categories. We have the upfront cost of getting the hardware. We have to buy that BDR. Number 2, we have the time that we invest to install the BDR, to test it, to seed the base image, all that kind of stuff. So getting it out there and running is number 2. And then number 3 would be all of our monthly costs, the annuity costs, some of which are fixed costs for licenses, some of which are variable costs for off-site storage of data, that kind of thing. So those monthly costs would be the 3rd category. So if we want high margin, since we set out to make a profitable BDR business, if we want high margin, we can't afford to give anything away for free. And frankly, there's value in every part of those 3 things, including the hardware. There's value in our installation services and testing. And there's, of course, value in the off-site storage, the monthly fees, and value in the fact that we can bring back data or bring up a system quickly when there's a problem. So if I were to give unsolicited advice, it would be don't be afraid to charge for the value you provide. So here's how we charge for BDRs. Number 1, whatever the acquisition cost for the hardware is, we charge that to clients, and we call it an installation setup fee. So if the BDR costs $2,000, then there's going to be a $2,000 installation or setup fee. Does the client own the equipment then? No, we do. Why is that important? Because it gives us the flexibility to provide more value in the future without having to sell again. So now we have the client in an agreement with us where we're going to provide some value, some functionality. We're not providing hardware. We're not providing licenses. We're providing functionality to them. And so if we think the right thing for that client, a year down the road is to get them a different box or to change to, some other backup strategy, we can make that decision ourselves. And the client doesn't really care as long as we continue to deliver the value. Also, having us own the hardware does make the relationship a little stickier. If the client wants to leave, then they have to either buy the BDR from us or they have to take the money they've spent on it and write it off and start with someone else. So with hardware cost, we want to make sure it's not coming out of our pocket, but we still want to own it, and that's how we do it. Number two, whatever those monthly costs are, we triple them at least. So here's an example from this week. Honestly, we just got this agreement signed this morning. So this is for real. This is a small business server client. And one of our salespeople priced this out. So if you look at this screen, this is if you're an eFolder customer already, you're familiar with this. This is part of the pricing spreadsheet we use to configure a BDR and figure out which is the right kind of collection of hardware and services so that we can quote to clients. And I have to say, putting in a plug for eFolder, this tool is awesome, and our salespeople really have learned how to use it competently and can talk through it with a technician and feel very confident that they're not recommending the wrong BDR to the client. So in this particular example, if you look at the two highlighted fields in yellow on the right-hand side, our upfront cost to buy this BDR is $1,899, and then the budgeted monthly cost is going to be $153. So these are the checks we're going to have to write to eFolder to get this BDR and to keep it up and running. And so I'll show you now a little clip from our proposal. We use Quozl for our proposals, and so we call BDRs the Advantage Point Standby Server. Advantage Point is the name we gave to our managed service. So you can see here we're charging a one-time cost of $25.98. So God bless this salesperson. He even marked up the cost. We made profit on that thing, and we get to own it. So it was $18.99. He's charging $25.98 as a one-time setup fee, and then a monthly recurring cost of $450. And the client bought that via email, actually. We didn't even have to have an in-person meeting to sell that. But I want to show you that this is real. This is for a client with a single server and just about 12 users. And they're paying $450 a month just for BDR functionality. Would they pay that if I was going out and saying, well, here's my brand X BDR, and I'm going to mark this up by 25%, and I'll tell you about all the bits and bytes and how big the hard drive is? I don't think so. The reason the client was comfortable paying this kind of price was because they thought about the cost of not doing it. They thought about the cost of not having this solution in place, and they realized that this cost was far less, was far more palatable than not having it. So at the top of the slide it says unbundle and build. So when I'm talking about that, what I mean is we don't include everything with that BDR price. So that $450 a month lets them use our hardware and lets them have a certain amount of storage of data on the hardware and a certain amount of off-site storage. But then we add options. Would you like fries with that? and I think these are important options, but different people buy them at different rates. So for example, one of the things we do is we offer a quarterly virtualization test. And we say to the client, let's virtualize a server every quarter, and let's have some people use it, and let's verify that it works the way we expect it to. And we charge by the hour for that. Or let's do a quarterly restore and recovery test. Let's not just kind of the routine ones you do to grab a file that someone accidentally deleted, but let's really restore and recover some machine to dissimilar hardware. And let's verify that this works so you can sleep at night. And clients really like to be able to sleep at night, so they're willing to pay us for that, and we do it on a quarterly basis for most of our clients. Or another example is disaster recovery planning. And this is something I feel pretty passionate about. We hear clients all the time, and I don't know if they're making this idea up in their own mind or if they're hearing this from partners, but we hear clients always say, yeah, we have a disaster recovery plan. It's called a BDR. And we say a BDR alone is not a disaster recovery plan. It is just technology. we use the BDR sale as a springboard to talk about developing a real disaster recovery plan, which is a project, which is another option to sell. So BDRs we see as a catalyst that pulls through a lot more work. And I think it would be a big mistake to leave that extra work on the table. Our clients really expect us to sell this value to them. Clients expect that we're testing things. Clients expect that we're going to give them good advice about doing a disaster recovery plan. So there's no reason to be shy about coming back and asking people to pay for it. So that's what we mean by unbundling it. It gives us a chance to have a conversation about each of these options and to only do it if the client's going to value it. So moving on to the third.
So Eric, just a very practical and technical question. And I just want to encourage everyone who's on the call to begin submitting questions. We do have the ability to ask Eric questions as we go along. Todd happens to ask a question about, back on the previous slide, it says, has your staff tested the max number of servers the BDR will virtualize, and does it come close to the max 20 servers mentioned on the screens?
So I'm just going to tell the truth, which is I'm not very technical at all. Any technical skills I might have developed have completely atrophied in the last several years. So I can't directly answer that question. What I can say, and this is the God's honest truth, is when I ask my staff, does the eFolder BDR do what you expect it to do? How do you feel about eFolder? How do you feel about the BDRs? Is it better than the previous vendor we used where we had a lot of problems? And I never get this about any products we sell, I get consistently positive affirmative responses from our engineers and technicians who say, yep, we can count on this thing. However they tell us to spec it, it's never failed us. And so that's really the only way I can answer that question. I know it's probably not the technical expertise you're looking for, but what I feel really good about is our techs are really very confident and positive about eFolder. We sell a lot of products from a lot of vendors we really like, but still they can find all kinds of things to criticize about them. And in this case, we haven't run into that yet.
Well, and I guess if I might, Eric, we appreciate that, first of all, but I might add, for Todd's benefit, the number of servers you can virtualize, the number of servers you're backing up, all of that we spec out in the tool that Eric was mentioning earlier, and in the spec sheets we have around the product. So you have resources available to you to help you to understand how to size an environment and which BDR appliance to put in. You have a choice of 5 different appliances, number one. Number two, you can change the pack-out configuration of those appliances from a storage and memory perspective at shipment. And then later, if the client environment changes, the BDRs, all eFolder BDRs are field upgradable. So you are able to upgrade memory and storage capacity on those appliances without doing a forklift upgrade of the appliance. So a couple just comments about, speccing and sizing and that sort of thing.
Well, I think the thing that I notice about that spreadsheet that I had shown on the screen a little bit ago is we are not making the mistakes we used to make. We used to sell Zenith, was the brand of BDR we used to sell, and very often that we didn't have a tool like that at the time that we could use to spec out equipment with confidence. So we were speccing equipment based on kind of our gut feeling about how things might go, combined with how much we think the client might be willing to tolerate in price. So sometimes we might sell a BDR that's a little thin for them, but we felt like it was what they would afford. Now that we have this pricing tool, we can say with confidence to the client, this is the right one for you to have, and this is what it's going to cost in order for you to have the protection. So it's an awesome spreadsheet for us. So there's another shameless plug.
Well, Eric, a practical question just about how you, and I don't think you mentioned this, but just how Ed wants to know, do Eric's clients sign an agreement for a few years with one of the BDRs? So can you kind of talk about what you do with term, how long of a term they're on and that sort of thing?
So our managed service agreements can either have a 1-year or a 3-year term. It is almost always a 3-year term with us. I would say that at least over 90% of our managed service agreements have a 3-year term. And a big reason that it goes that way is that we tell our clients they can lock in the pricing for 3 years and not have a price increase over a 3-year period, which they like. But also we pay our salespeople much more generously for a 3-year agreement than we do for a 1-year agreement. And we do that just for the reason of, things like buying a BDR. We want to make sure it's going to be in place and in use long enough so that we can get good ROI from it.
Great.
All right. So moving on.
Yep.
Number 3, protect margin. So I talked about, pricing based on value, talking about how much downtime costs in money and in opportunity costs. And I want to reinforce, I don't think that those conversations are BS. Network outages, data loss, disasters, they cost real money. It's not just theoretical. But think about what clients have had to pay you in the past to kind of save their bacon when they didn't have an adequate solution in place. What if they could pay you the same thing but on a predictable monthly basis to avoid that pain? You are providing value there. Secondly, if you're worried about how your competitors are pricing BDRs, you're missing the point. If you're providing value and great service, your clients are usually not talking to anybody else. And like I said, we have, I think it's 72 BDRs out there right now, and we just don't have the experience of competing on price. And I wouldn't take, if it happened once or twice, I wouldn't let that drive my pricing decisions. And then third, ask yourself, are all BDRs really the same? And I just confess that I'm not a technical expert, but I can say with confidence that I don't think they are. So as I mentioned, we're in the process of replacing all of our old Zenith BDRs with eFolder BDRs. And remember, we own all those Zenith BDRs. Their value is on our balance sheet as a fixed asset. And it was a painful decision to say, you know what, we're going to write that off. That's a 6-figure write-down for us to say we're going to essentially treat those assets as worthless. And the reason we decided to do it was we couldn't consistently do recoveries for clients. We would have corruptions that hadn't gotten detected, and there were times when we couldn't recover for a client on other BDRs. So just because someone else is selling some BDR doesn't mean it's the same as the BDR that you're going to sell. And I feel confident when we're selling the BDRs that we sell today that ours can deliver, that we're going to be able to keep the promise. And I think that it's a mistake that we make oftentimes when we get together at conferences and we talk to a bunch of people who make BDRs to assume that they're all the same. I don't believe that's true. So if someone's selling a lesser product or selling an unproven product, or someone's selling some other cloud-based backup option, is that the same? No. And we shouldn't let clients see those things as equal. Like I said, that thinking starts with us. We have to recognize that some vendor partners are better than others and allow us to deliver a better experience to clients. So if a client has a quote for a BDR that's half the price, my guess is that they're seeing a quote for a lesser model or brand, or that the partner who's quoting it doesn't have the expertise to deliver real value to the client. Sure, it costs less now, but how much will it really cost them over its lifetime? How well will recovery functionality work when they really need it? So this strategy for pricing for us, basing it on value, protecting our margin, is the same for us with any hardware as a service or software as a service offering we have. We use it for firewalls and BDRs and antivirus licensing, all those kinds of things. And then finally, this last point is kind of unpopular, I think, with a lot of managed service partners, but I'm going to say it anyway, which is my experience is that we managed service providers are great technology people, but we make terrible actuaries. If I wanted to be an actuary estimating, how much people are going to use in managed service agreements or on an insurance plan, I would have stayed at American Express selling insurance. Take the risk out of your pricing. Charge for the value you bring. That's just a thought. So our quote on BDR pricing includes no human labor whatsoever. We charge for everything. If clients need help with a recovery, they pay us for that. That's not part of the $450 a month in that agreement someone signed. That kind of goes opposite of how people often think managed services is supposed to work, but that's how we approach it. So Ted, that's pretty much what I have to share about our approach to selling and pricing BDRs. So I'll hand the baton back to you.
Okay, well, there's a ton of questions flowing in, so I encourage everyone to continue to ask away. Let's just double-click on that real quick. So the $450 a month you showed earlier in that one particular example. So that doesn't include. That does not include. I mean, what does it include and what does it not include?
That includes having that device physically on site and available to them as a tool for their business. It includes having the backup functionality run on that device, and it includes off-site storage of data up to a limit. And that's it.
And then so it wouldn't include the other items you mentioned, which is like kind of quarterly test processes,
no.
or actually doing a recovery if there is some sort of outage and that sort of thing.
No, it wouldn't. Those are add-on options. So when I talk about unbundling and then selling options, we would say to the client, if you want us to test virtualization every quarter or every month or whenever you want it, or test restores, we think you should have us do that, but we want to give you the choice, and we'll estimate that will take, I don't know, an hour or 3 hours to do whatever procedure, and you can pay us for that. And likewise, if they had a disaster, something went wrong and they had to virtualize on a BDR and recover from that disaster, that's not included in our BDR pricing either. That's something we charge for separately.
Right. So I guess the great news about this approach is that you get a very high predictability in terms of your gross margin you're going to get. I think it would be helpful because there's another question related to this. I'm going to back up. I'm going to go back to an earlier slide. This slide here. And I'm going to go down one. The great news about your approach is it gives you really high predictability in terms of your recurring gross margin, which you're currently clocking around 75%.
Yes, on BDRs. Right. So that's
right,
not our gross margin for our whole business.
No, right, but on these BDRs. And so Gavin asked a question, although it varies by client, does Erik have an idea of the average income per gigabyte of data per client? And I guess the answer is, it's 75 on average, 75% for BDRs. So, I mean, you could take that down to the per gigabyte level, but that's not really how you're selling it. You're speccing the client. You're saying the servers are this big. You have this much data.
Yeah, I mean, what we've done, Ted, is so I'm saying two things that in a way contradict one another. One thing I'm saying is our BDR gross margin is 75%. The other thing I'm saying is we take our cost and triple it. Well, that would be 66%. So when we quote the monthly cost to a client, we are taking the estimate from the eFolder spreadsheet and tripling it and planning on a 66% gross margin. We're pricing off-site storage, however, at a higher margin than that. So off-site storage might be sold at an 80% margin, and the average we're getting to, or 85%. The average we're getting to is 75%. And we intentionally go on a higher margin for the off-site storage because that's the number that's going to grow over time. So that will drive up our margins over time. And since we want to protect our margins from price pressure, we're going in that direction rather than taking the growth opportunity and having it compress our margins over time.
Great. Okay, good. So, Gavin, I think that pretty much answers your question about how to price if you're going to focus on the per gigabyte offsite component of the solution from a pricing perspective. Kind of a related question, Ken wants to know just, and I think you maybe addressed this earlier, so maybe you came a little bit late, but just can you talk a little bit about, so Ken's question is first, how do we avoid being on the hook for the capital costs?
Well, and the answer to that is don't get on the hook for the capital costs. Make the client pay the full cost of the capital up front by charging it as an install fee.
Right, but you do something unique in the sense that you recapture the actual cash cost of the hardware with your installation fee, but then you retain title to the device itself.
Yeah, we don't sell BDRs. We sell a service.
Okay. Let's see here. There's a lot of questions coming in. So just a question back from, and I'm just going to hop around a bit, Erik, so just do your best here. Can you talk Robin wants to know, how do you pay your salespeople, i.e., how much base or base plus commission? I mean, what's your general approach to compensation for your salespeople?
When I tell you this, everyone will hang up because they'll think I'm stupid. If they don't already think I'm stupid. I get a lot of grief in HTG for the answer to this question. Our salespeople make a base of $40,000 a year, and then they're paid very differently depending on what they sell. But we pay a lot on managed services And so get ready. Here's what our salespeople get. And so managed services would include BDRs. They get paid on a 3-year agreement 3 times the monthly revenue. So if they sell an agreement that's $1,000 a month, we pay them $3,000 for closing that in a 3-year agreement. And we pay them a 5% residual every month. So every month after that, they're going to get $50 on that $1,000 agreement as long as they hit their overall sales quota for the quarter. So it's very generous. But I
don't know if anyone's going to hang up, but people may call to apply. Yes. You may get some applications or resumes.
Yes, send your resume to jobs@sccnet.com. But we pay a lot for that. Now, to give you a point of comparison, our target margin on hardware resale, things like ThinkPad laptops, is 20%. And so the way we pay people there is we pay them 30% of the gross profit on the sale price of that laptop after a 10% load. So if the laptop cost us $1,000 to buy and they sold it for, I'm making this ridiculous just so the numbers are easy, if they sold it for $1,500, we add 10% to the cost. So the cost for our salesperson is $1,100. So the profit was $400. $1,500 minus $1,100, and they get 30% of that, so they make $120 for selling that laptop. The truth is they're not going to be able to sell a laptop for that much money, so they might only get paid $10, $20 for selling a laptop. You know, that might bring in $1,000 to the business, but it's just not worth as much as BDR revenue is because that's annuity revenue. So we pay a lot in order to be able to get that monthly recurring revenue.
But it's really clear. I mean, the emphasis is on 3-year agreements and services. I mean, that's
if they sell a 1-year agreement, they get paid 1 time the monthly.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So if they want to make $1,000, they can sign a 12-month agreement, but they'll get $2,000 extra if they make it a 3-year.
Excellent. Okay. So again, you're driving those longer terms, and that's really what you want to see happen is have the bulk of your clients being on the hook for 3-year agreements. So.
Yeah, but we can make those numbers work because we make margins, you know, because we're very intentional about what should the margin be, and it's got to be high enough so that that kind of commission is affordable.
Yeah, so let's see here. I want to tackle a couple, you know, what people are calling in the Q&A log, just, you know, eFolder specific questions. So Ken wants to know, does eFolder sell and provide virtualization and bare metal solution? What is it? I know of Aperture and StorageCraft. And the answer is we do both. You know, we believe, you know, one of the only BDR players in the market out there to have really an open cloud platform that allows our partner base to make their choice on what kind of best-of-breed bare metal imaging software you want to be using in a solution. So we've been shipping eFolder BDR with StorageCraft Shadow Protect software for, you know, coming on 2 years now, and that's what SCC and Erik's organization has been using. And we're on the cusp of introducing a similar suite of solutions that incorporate Aperture software to do the actual imaging of the production servers. So just really quickly for the benefit of everybody on the phone, you know, if you're not familiar with the way eFolder BDR works, let me just take a minute here just to, you know, review kind of the key piece parts. You know, to Ken's question, we partner with best-of-breed software companies that provide server imaging software. That imaging software will store those server images on a local appliance or in a local storage area, you know, storage configuration. And then those images themselves are then backed up to the eFolder storage cloud and either backed up or replicated there, which gives you protection in the case of a worst-case disaster on the customer premises. And then there's multiple ways for you to help a client recover. If a server fails, if there's bad hardware, if there's a software corruption, you can restore on the eFolder BDR on the customer's location. Or alternatively, if a major disaster hits, then you can, and that whole location, all the production servers and the BDR appliance are destroyed or lost, then you can recover the server images from the eFolder storage cloud. Or alternatively, we are on the cusp of introducing the eFolder Continuity Cloud, which would allow you to, on demand, bring up a compute node in the eFolder cloud and run those server images, run those servers basically in a virtualized way in our cloud environment. So you have multiple different recovery options. So that hopefully answers the question about what kind of software partnerships we have out there and how those get incorporated in the solution. And then I'll just put this rate card up in front of you so you can kind of study the way the pricing works. Without going into too much detail, and Eric covered some of this, you've got the upfront cost of the appliance, you've got the monthly recurring cost of the actual imaging software, which is either Aperture or StorageCraft Shadow Protect software. And then you have the monthly recurring charge for the BDR service, which includes 150 gigabytes of storage in eFolder Storage Cloud. And then there's a per gigabyte fee for all of the storage above 150 gigabytes. That's basically the way the pricing works on a wholesale basis to you, the partner. So with that, let me dive back into the Q&A log here. Just, Eric, a question about marketing strategy. How do you locate and identify prospects, and what does your sales cycle look like?
I think my answer might be boring, but I think the number one way we do it is through networking. So when we hire salespeople, the first thing they have to do is build their own networking group. That they're not allowed to do things like BNI, but they have to find other sellers who are selling to our audience. So these might be copier salespeople or people selling office space or moving services or phone salespeople. And they meet with them on a regular basis, and they're expected to provide leads to them, and they're expected to expect something in return. So we look for our salespeople to get to know a lot of other people who know a lot of other people, and to do networking. That is probably the most important part of how we generate leads. And then you add to that, and I will say our salespeople do, at least in the beginning of their career, when they start here, probably in the first 6 months, they do their share of cold calling and door knocking. And that's an important way to do it, unfortunately. It's not fun, but we tell them that, and they know that it's a critical part of it. On top of that, we do events. So we have our biggest event. We do an annual event next week where we're going to have about 550 people attend. But most of our events are like an 8-person lunch and learn, where we'll just have some lunch brought in on a topic, and we'll bring in a bunch of IT managers, or we'll bring in some small business owners who might already be clients or who might be prospects, and we'll talk about a topic. So kind of like we're doing on this webinar, we might talk about what BDRs are and what backup and disaster recovery plans ought to be like, and what technology should accompany them, and serve them lunch, and not really try to sell anything to them at the time, but just show that we are experts and have ideas, and we can be a resource to them. I don't know.
Hey, Eric,
I think those are the answers.
Yeah, I know a fair amount about your business. Can you talk a little bit about your vertical focus, because you do have one, right?
Oh, okay. So we do have a focus on nonprofit organizations, and we have about 40% of our revenue comes from nonprofits, which might sound counterintuitive. People think nonprofits don't have any money, but there are a lot of nonprofits who have plenty of money to spend and can get grants if they don't have any. So as part of that, we show up everywhere nonprofit organizations show up in town. Every nonprofit-related conference we have people at, whether we're at a trade show booth or we're just attending. We look for speaking opportunities. So I spoke about security 2 weeks ago to a group of church business administrators because a woman I know from my church asked me to, and I am speaking in a couple of weeks to this group here in Minnesota that's a bunch of nonprofit financial people, a bunch of CFOs of mid-sized nonprofit organizations, and we're going to talk about cloud computing. So that's one thing, is when you pick a vertical market, and that's not a very narrow vertical, but it allows us to be focused on being there every time. You start to see the same people. Minneapolis, St. Paul feels like a small town when you have a vertical market and you're seeing the same people at every event. So that would be another strategy for us.
And you talked a little bit, so we talked about verticals, we talked about how you're getting out there and finding new leads and new prospects, and how you're challenging the sales team to go out there and do prospecting. Can you talk a little bit about the success and challenges you may have had in kind of moving into a larger client set?
The challenges we've had moving to larger clients have been, number one, our own fear of working with organizations that had internal IT people. That was a challenge for us. We brought a lot of our own baggage to those conversations, including, gee, will they find out that we're really not that amazing when a real IT person is looking at our work? All the way from that to, you know, these IT people will try to sabotage us at every turn. We should expect the worst from them. I mean, so part of it was our own messed up thinking about who these people were, and instead, when we show up and do those consultative questions and we ask some of IT people, you know, they become our strongest allies a lot of the time. They don't see us as a competitor. They see us as someone who's going to support them, who's going to be in their corner, someone who can let them take a vacation. So that would be one thing. The other thing that's challenging is it's not as fast a process to be able to get to the decision makers in the sales process. It's, you know, there are more layers in those companies, and it's harder to get to a CEO or a CFO, you know, the person who's really making the decisions behind the scenes sometimes. And one of the challenges we've had, or one of the places we've fallen down, is we don't work hard enough to get in front of the real decision makers. So we invest a huge amount of time and a whole bunch of sales calls and consulting meetings working with people who ultimately don't have the authority to do anything. And that feels different to me from small business, where basically everyone has to be scrappy, everyone's involved in every conversation in a small company. So that would be another example of kind of something we've had to change. Is that?
Yep, that's great.
Okay.
So just kind of a more practical question from David, just kind of back to kind of managing the overall client lifecycle. He wants to know, how do you handle BDR upgrades when it's time? Do you get the customer to pay for it?
So we are have been experiencing that over the last year or so as our earliest BDRs have come of age. And to be honest, for us, some of those most of those, well, all those BDRs for us that kind of have gotten long in the tooth are Zenith, because that's what we used to sell before. And the approach we've taken is we don't feel with a lot of those clients like we can make them pay for another one, because we believe we should have sold them a better solution. So in some cases, we are just buying the new BDR ourselves and putting it out there. But we never give the client the choice about, you know, should we put a different BDR out there. We give them a choice about when we do it and that kind of stuff. We do charge the client a setup fee for a new BDR which in essence is we're getting the money back for what we bought the new BDR for, when they've outgrown the BDR that they had. And that is very often the case. And we don't say, hey, that's our risk. That's the risk of owning a business, that you're going to outgrow systems just like you'd outgrow a server. And so when that happens, we're having regular quarterly business reviews with clients, and we'll say we're getting to the point in the next 6 months where it's going to be time to put in a new BDR. Let's start talking about what that means from a cost standpoint, and we handle it that way.
Great. I think that's a great answer and a great way to think about the upgrade cycle. I mean, it's that it's not, you know, client outgrowing today's solution is not your problem that you need to bear, even if you're focused on managed services. It's the client's challenge, and you're there to help them solve it with an upgraded solution. So now my question, my anticipation is your answer might be no to this, Eric, so I just want to kind of ask a follow-on question. But would Eric provide a list of the services and products that he sells and a pricing strategy for each? And I'll let you answer that. But my kind of follow-on question is how do you devise your pricing and your strategy? Who in your organization is responsible for it, and how are you, who's responsible for it, and how are you, staying ahead of things and continuing to bring out new service offerings in your managed services portfolio?
Yeah. So the first question, I think my answer would be no, not that way. But I think that if I were having a phone conversation with someone that was on this webinar and they had some questions, I'd be happy to sort of anecdotally share information, that kind of stuff. So the reason I would say no is not because I don't want it to be public so much as it's just a lot of work to pull that together, but I'd be happy to talk to someone who had a follow-up question. And now, Ted, because I talked so long, I forgot what your follow-on question
Well, the follow-on question is just how you go about, I mean, you have a strategy and you have a pricing approach, and how do you go about defining what those a la carte services are and what that list is, and then actually how you price them?
Well, so for me, honestly, this all began with joining HTG because that was a place I really learned how to read financials and understand what margin is, for example. I didn't know what the difference was between margin and markup, for example. So when I started to understand margin and what that was, then I could start to look at what is the margin we get on different things and where do we see the opportunity for the highest margin. So we, every year, have a budgeting process we go through where we plan our revenue and we plan our cost of goods. And we say, what was the margin we got on PCs? What was the margin we got on servers? What was the margin we got on managed services labor? You know, all those things. And how do we need that to change in order to have the business results we want down the road? So we just say, look, you know, if we want to be more profitable next year, we're going to have to get better margins somewhere. And then we'll just sit down as a management team. So the leader of my technical team, leader of my sales team, our CFO, and I are sitting in a room having this conversation in, you know, in general, not about a specific deal, and making a decision. We want higher margin here. We don't think we're going to get as high a margin there. How does that look when we total it all up at the end of the year, and are we happy with it? And so really, that's how we wound up setting BDR margins so high, is we were selling managed services back in the olden days on an all-you-can-eat model and losing money. And so we wanted to go from a negative net margin to a positive net margin, and we saw BDRs as an opportunity to demonstrate giant value and make giant margin.
Yeah, let me just, a couple questions immediately came in asking what is HTG, and let me just kind of make a plug. HTG stands for Heartland Technology Groups, and it's a peer networking group that Erik and his company are involved with. And I want to let everyone know they are looking for new partners to join up with the, call it 260-odd companies that are already in the organization. And as you heard from Erik, HTG helps business owners and principals really, you know, get their business focused on growth and profitability. So just type into Google Heartland Technology Groups and you'll find the website. I think it's htgpeers.com.
I think that's right. I think it's htgpeers.com. I can't remember for sure.
Yeah, but anyway, just Google it. But I just want to, maybe we'll end with just a plug for HTG in general. It is we're involved. eFolder's involved as a vendor sponsor, and we get to work with just some outstanding business leaders and people who are really focused on growing and thriving in their companies. So I'm a big believer in it. So
yeah, it's htgpeergroups.com.
There you go.
Is the website. And honestly, when I said we had 12 people and I was losing money 6 years ago, I would credit a huge amount of the change in our business to working with peers. It's a huge investment to be in HTG. Financially, it's not a huge investment, but time-wise it is. And it has paid off over and over again.
Well, great. So we're well past the top of the hour here. I want to thank everybody for joining us today, and want to really thank Erik Thorsell for giving us an hour, just jam-packed hour of advice and counsel for everybody on how to grow your business around BDR. It's greatly appreciated, and thank you, everyone, for joining today. Take care now.